What's going on, guys? We have Sensible Prepper Live, Prepper School, and we've got a great list today,
Yes,
and
we
we've got a
do.
great Robbie Wheaton with us.
It's great to be back.
He's been on vacation and all kind of stuff. So I'm jealous, but anyway, he's here again, thank goodness. And Robbie has been a gunsmith for over 20 years. He is part of our prepper group, and he has Wheaton Arms, sells some of the best Glock aftermarket parts out there, the best trigger. He also does the upgrades for Palmetto State Armory for their Dagger series.
Yep.
And also he has Rob Wheaton YouTube channel. So check it out. We'll have a link to his YouTube channel down below in the description. We also have Sarah Mack over at the computer, and she'll be monitoring questions. And if you have questions, we will take a break, and we'll try to answer the questions we can. And also, the last but not least, Exotac is sponsoring today's video, and you get 20% off using Sootch 20 when you go to the link down below in the description. And I have a video coming out about the Exotac tools because they're so freaking cool. And that'll be out on Thursday.
Awesome.
But guys, it is the best fire starters.
Yeah.
Bar none. Just the best.
Bic?
Yeah, well, Bic. Aside from Bic. But they have their fire sleeve, which you can put the Bic in it.
There we go.
See?
All right.
And, yeah, Bic, the one thing about Bic lighters, and this is extra, this isn't about what we're talking about, but one thing about Bic lighters is it is the most convenient. It's the easiest. It's like, oh, yeah, got my fire going. But they corrode, the fuel comes out. I mean, at the worst possible time.
Oh, yes. They always quit at the worst possible time.
It's like they're going, you're going, okay, it works. And you get to where and you're going, why isn't this working?
Dude, I couldn't tell you how many times I've been on a plane and lighter works when I take off. When I get to where I'm going, lighter doesn't work anymore. I know the change in altitude, pressure, or whatever messes with them.
Are you up there smoking cigars while you're flying?
Maybe.
He's part of the Mile High Club for cigar smoking. All right, guys. Well, we're going to get serious here. We've got 25 survival skills that you need to learn now. And I'm going to tell you a little backstory. Last night we had Patreon Live. We do a Patreon Live on Monday nights. And if you want to join us, we have a great group over there. And so on Monday night, one of the girls that had just started actually was just a little overwhelmed. And one of the things that was the big deal, she said, we've been acquiring stuff for years and we're in a panic mode because we don't, we just need some guidance. And just thinking about that, I thought, this is something that it doesn't necessarily take more acquiring things. Now, some of these will. Some of these you may not have. Some of these you may have. But the big thing here is, guys, it's not about how much stuff you can hoard together.
I was just about to say that.
It's not about that. Now, are there things we need? Yes, there are. But be careful not to get just addicted to buying.
Well, you really have to balance your needs and your wants. There's lots of things that we all want. But there's, when we really get down to the core of it, there's very few things that we actually need,
right?
Especially for survival. And you can narrow that down to a very, very small list of things that really fit into that needs box. Now you can expand that needs box to make things more comfortable for you. But the reality of it is, your needs are very small and very simple. You look at these guys that hike the Appalachian Trail from beginning to end. And, a lot of them start with a backpack on their back, a few provisions, sleeping, shelter, and water purification. And that's really about it. And they'll hike for, from one end of the Appalachian Trail to the other and work a little bit along the way, make some money to be able to buy some things and borrow money from people, beg for people. But I mean, there's guys that have hiked the Appalachian Trail from beginning to end. I was reading an article about one over the weekend, and it really kind of touched home about this. About this guy was very well off and ended up losing his wallet, lost everything on the trail.
Wow.
And found himself in a situation where he had no money, no forms of ID, no anything. And he went for about 2.5 or 3 weeks on the Appalachian Trail with nothing but his backpack on his back. And people helped him out along the way, provided him with food, provided him with water, and he realized during this adventure just how little we really need as human beings to be able to survive in a in that type of situation.
Well, you think about history. I mean, even in the 1800s, I mean, compared to what we have now, they had very little.
Yep.
And even those that were rich, I mean, their survival needs were very basic. And that's one thing about it, guys. When you're thinking about prepping, your survival needs are basic. There can be some outlying issues, but strict survival is food, water, shelter. I mean, we learned that in school when we were kids. I don't think they're teaching that any longer, but it's food, water, and shelter. So, man, that's a great analogy, Robbie. First thing, is getting these skills. And I've been big about this. I've talked about it a long time, and putting your skills to practice. You can buy all this stuff, but if you're not practicing, if you're not working and seeing how these things work, had a buddy of mine just bought a really nice power bank. It was a power generator bank, and he went on a trip. Thing went out. I mean, within just a day.
Yeah.
And he had spent a lot of money on it. Okay, so first thing we want to talk about is purifying water. Now, water is in the rule of threes. You can only live 3 days without water. So water is a very important thing to acquire.
It is. And, that's one of those things that you should always look for alternative water sources near where you live. In case something happens, you don't have access to your tap anymore. Your tap's contaminated. You can't get water out of the tap, or the water's been turned off for whatever reason. Bottled water is going to dry up almost immediately in any kind of emergency situation. So you need to have an alternative water supply or water source that's near your home to where you can access it.
Well, one thing too, and one of the guys in our group, he stores water, and he gets the big 55-gallon drums, and he fills them up, and he has them in his garage, and he has them set up, and he uses that water for cooking, for flushing the toilet. I mean, there's a ton of different things that you can do to store water. But like Robbie said, you need to have a source. But here's the skill part. You need to be able to filter it. Or at least kill the bacteria and the germs in it. So first off is boiling. You can boil water. That's a great way. But here's the one caveat. You need to have something large to be able to boil.
Right.
If you're going to boil some water, you don't want to have a little pan. You boil some water, use it. You boil some water and use it. So you want to have something that's fairly large. In fact, I'm going to be doing a video coming up, and it's a big cooking pot. You can cook soups in it. You can do all kinds of things, but having that larger size is really important. So you want to know how to boil your water. Now, that doesn't take the sediment out. It doesn't even take the taste a lot of times. Right. And then you need bleach. Bleach is great for,
water purification.
Right. And that's something people have been doing.
And a gallon of bleach will purify something like 40,000 gallons or 60,000 gallons of water.
Yeah, because it's just drops.
Yep.
So, that's one thing to have back, but to know how to do it.
And the mixing ratio. So your water doesn't taste like you're drinking bleach.
Right. Now, for us, we have the Berkey, and we have other water filtration type systems. But sooner or later, those can go to, we can use them up. Now, Berkey's 3,000 gallons per filter. So we have 4 filters. We have 24,000 gallons of water. But the thing is to acquire the skill. We have a pool. So if we go out to the pool, how are we going to get that water to be potable water? And so you need to learn the skills. Rain catchment system is one thing we have. And so we can collect water that way. Some places it's illegal. You may have a well, you may have a spring or a creek. The creek in particular, you've got to be able to filter that water.
That's right.
You can't drink it.
Yeah, unless it's a spring head, which is pretty rare.
Well, that's what we have. Yeah. We have a spring head, but it's rare to have it on your property or to know where it is.
Yep.
Okay, so water, vital, number one. Now, the other thing, and guys, I've got this because we have so many, I'm going to have to look over. I got a list over here. Is repairs, carpentry repairs. Knowing how, because you may have an incident where a tree falls through your house, or part of it catches on fire, or, different just things happen.
Yeah. Carpentry is one thing as a homeowner. I think that, and a prepper, I think that carpentry and plumbing skills and electrical are 3 things that people really, really neglect. they're like, oh, well, I'll call a guy. I'll call a guy for this. I'll call a guy for that. But being able to have those skills to be able to do those things yourself, being able to repair something, being able to make something and build something, especially in a survival situation, you have to have the tools and you have to know how to use those tools to be able to keep things repaired and maintained around your home.
Well, and two, not even for repair. Let's say you just need something.
Yeah.
You can make it. Now, I know a lot of you guys, I mean, I'm like this. I go out and work with wood and do all kind of stuff. But to get that skill, if you don't have that skill, is something that you need to really work on.
That's right.
And it's just one of those things, and it's really basic. And you can go to Home Depot. They have all kind of classes. They have all kind of stuff.
There's this thing called YouTube.
There's this thing called YouTube. and this is the thing. And that's why we say now. We put this a now on the end because it's things that you can do now to learn. One of the things, I had this kid, he was a college kid, and he said, I have no money, but he says, I really need to prep. I really feel the need to prep. And he said, I've got some stuff put back in my closet, but my parents are not on board. And I told him, I said, and he said, but I don't have a lot of money. I said, learn skill. That is very important. Learn skill. Okay. Next is, now this is a little bit outside, but this is something that, going to a self-defense class, learning how to defend yourself. Martial arts is a huge one, but you don't have to go to a full-on martial arts class. You can go just to some self-defense classes. Guys, if you've never been in a scuffle, you need to have some skill because when something happens, it happens quick.
Yep.
And you can watch on YouTube. You can watch a lot of stuff where people they just don't know how to fight. They don't know. I grew up fighting, and I grew up
mainstream media.
Yeah, well, you can watch the mainstream media, and you can see people get beat down. So it's very important to learn some kind of self-defense, and then maybe even martial arts. Martial arts is great for the mind. It's great for physical conditioning, and it gives you confidence.
Well, one of the big things about being in a self-defense situation, you need to learn how to strike, and strike, I'm talking about punching or kicking, right? Because if you don't understand how to punch and how to punch correctly, you can hurt yourself.
Oh, you can break your wrist.
You can break your wrist. You can break your knuckles. You can break the bones in the back of your hand. It's very easy. If you haven't conditioned your hands for striking, it's very easy to break bones in your hand and your wrist if you haven't conditioned those bones for striking. So learning how to strike and conditioning your hands to strike is something that's very important.
Well, a lot of times you see people and they're just flailing, and you need to be able to get control of that and have some more purpose, because survival can be dependent on you being able to defend yourself, not only you but your family. And that goes with men and women. But definitely women are more vulnerable, but in today's society, but it definitely does.
Well, a lot of that is just the adrenaline response to a traumatic environment, a traumatic situation. You basically kind of white out, and your body is just doing its own thing,
right?
And you're not controlling the situation.
Well, it's fight or flight.
It is. That's right.
And you got to. Sometimes you have to fight.
You do, but you have to be able to control that adrenaline and harness it and be able to use it to your advantage instead of letting it consume you and take you over. You get tunnel vision, you lose all your peripheral vision. There's a lot of negatives that come along with adrenaline that people that have never been in that type of situation, they don't know how to control it or how to use it effectively.
Right. Now, next is really close, and that's your firearms training. Now, as preppers, a lot of times we have a lot of guns, we have a lot of ammunition, we've got plate carriers, we got all of our stuff. But you got to get out and train with it.
Yeah.
But not only train with it, but go to a good class. Even if it's not all that great, even if it's just a local class and some guys going through some stuff, the great thing about doing that is, and it's just like with martial arts, you can watch all that stuff on YouTube, but it's different when you have an instructor to be able to go, hold on, you don't realize it, but you're doing this or you're doing that. Yep. Same thing with firearms. And Robbie knows because he's been a firearms trainer for a long time. And so,
well, and I tell guys all the time, don't just take a course from one person. Take instruction from a lot of different people. And I tell this to my boys with their sports and athletics and everything. Any opportunity that you have to get training from someone, take advantage of that training. You may not learn a lot from that one individual person, but you're always going to pick up little things from each individual coach, each individual trainer that you go and see. And all of those little things will add up to making you a much more well-rounded individual, especially with firearms training or athletics.
And there's the pressure.
That's right.
Because you do feel some pressure.
Sure.
And you know, they don't expect you to perform fantastically, but you know that you do, and that helps. So, and two, it allows you to understand your gun. It allows you to understand when you're drawing it from the holster, putting magazine reloads, doing all that stuff. It's vital.
Well, you know, in a defensive situation, you're going to revert to your lowest level of training with firearms or self-defense or whatever. So whatever your lowest level of training is in a stressful environment like that, that's what you're going to revert to. And if that means that with your semi-automatic pistol that your thumb goes across the back of your hand and the slide cuts a big groove in your hand because that's your lowest level of training, that's what you're going to revert to.
And it's going to malfunction.
And you're going to have a malfunction, and you're going to have to perform a malfunction drill, which your brain has just about shut down, and you don't even remember how to do that. So you're just sitting there pulling the trigger, wondering why your pistol's not going boom, boom.
Right. That's right. Okay. Next, and this is a little different, but this is something for long-term prepping, is welding.
Mm-hmm.
You know, learning to work with metals, dealing with things, you know, being able to manufacture or, you know, and put something together.
Yeah. And all the different types of welding. I mean, you've got stick welding, you've got MIG welding, you've got TIG welding, you've got heliarc for aluminum and titanium. You know, there's lots of different types of welding, lots of different types of materials. Brazing, you know, you have to learn what materials you can weld, what materials you can't weld, what are common materials that will weld to one another, what materials you can't cross over and weld to one another. So a lot that you can learn when it comes to welding.
Yes, I mean it's one of those skills that that is very demanding. A lot of there's a big market for it. Sewing. So we're going from welding to sewing, but sewing.
Either way, you're still stitching things together.
Exactly.
Whether it's clothes or metal.
And guys, you know, a lot of times, you know, I hand stuff off to, you know, Sarah Mack or my wife, and I say, "Could you fix this?" But understanding how to sew. You could be out in the field. You could be somewhere where you have a big rip and you're showing your rear end. You know, you want to sew. Maybe your pack's damaged and your stuff's falling out. Being able to sew.
You know, that was one of the things when I was in the Marine Corps in boot camp that there was a sewing class. They teach you how to sew when you're in boot camp, or they used to. I don't know if they still do anymore. But they used to teach everyone how to sew, so you knew how to make expedient field repairs to your gear and your equipment while you're in the field.
Right.
And you know, that is it's a skill that is important enough for the military to want to teach to all of its recruits. It's absolutely a skill that's important enough for you as a prepper to know as well.
And really, all the military skills really feather into what we're talking about. Not specifically, we have a lot more, but there are a lot of these. And so knowing military skills, if you've been through basic training, if you've been through military, there's a lot. Okay. Fire making. And guys, this is one that really just, you know, I've mentioned this a number of times, but, you know, we did a fire clinic. That's what we called it for our prepper group. And we got everybody out. They got their fire kits out. And it was really eye-opening, you know, how little people had the tools. Mm-hmm. They just didn't know how to use it.
Yeah.
And it was very frustrating for them. But thank goodness we were there to help them get through it. You know,
one of the big things is knowing the correct wood to gather to burn.
Right.
You know, you can't go and cut down or break down green trees and expect them to burn.
Right.
Or even green firewood that's been cut and split. You know, it has to dry and it has to season and it has to cure to be able to burn correctly and light easily.
Well, and then making your tinder, getting that fire even started. Yep. You know, I have a video about how to start fire in the rain, and it's doable. It's very doable. You just have to know a few things, and before long, you got a fire.
Yep.
And so, and it was raining, and it had been raining for a week. And, you know, I was out there going, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And then all of a sudden I was like, okay. And I had it all going. So getting your fire kit out and learning how to use it and having redundancy with your fire tools. But, you know, the fact is, if it's a really long-term situation, you know, bow drill method, things like that, flint and steel.
Yeah, the longer the grid down situation, the more primitive our tools are going to become.
Right. Because we're going to use up.
That's right.
That's right. Scavenging. Now, I'll tell you what, I'm a scavenger. And the reason why I say that is because there's a place up the road here that takes their pallets and they put them out at the road for people to take. And so a lot of times we'll go by there. I haven't been by there lately because I got enough pallets. But that is a great source for repairs and just doing things. I mean, you can make furniture out of this stuff. and it's free. You can use it for firewood, for that matter. The thing is, and I want to put a little side note, is that if it's treated, it can be dangerous to breathe in the fumes. So you want to kind of shy away from that. But there's a ton of different things that you can scavenge, and from different places. Now, don't steal. Don't take something that's not yours. But even now, a lot of times, if they have a large construction site going somewhere and they're dumping stuff in the dumpster, and you can go by and ask, and they're glad for you to take it because it costs them less.
The construction sites was definitely going to be one that's on my list and with all the building that we have going on around here, all the new construction here.
Right.
Construction sites are a great place for scrap wood, spare wood.
Right. And they just cut a piece off, and they have a short piece, and they got still a big old long, 2x6 or something.
Yep.
So
and most of it here is pine. And it's already dried. It's already cured. It makes great kindling. It makes great firewood, starter firewood.
That's right.
So even if you're just using it for, to increase your firewood stores, it's a great easy source for firewood.
My mother-in-law, there was a place that made golf clubs, and they made the heads. This is when they were wooden heads.
Yep.
And they would go, and they'd have all these blanks that they'd toss out because of whatever reason. And she would go by with the truck, load them up, and come back with all these like funky shapes, and that was a great way to start fires. But there's a lot of different things that, you can scavenge that people sometimes just throw out and, or go to some places. But again, you got to be careful because you don't want to break the moral law. I mean, even if the rule of law is down, you still have a moral law to stay with, because God's still God. Okay, medical's big. Medical's very big. Having a good trauma kit, having a good well-stocked medical bag.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And all the thing, everybody always thinks about, well, I've got to have my tourniquet, and I've got to have all of this, your basic first aid, from Band-Aids, from boo-boos to big boo-boos. But medicines are one of those things that in a long-term grid down situation that you're going to need. Anything from, your aspirin, Tylenol, Advil, to antibiotics for, different cuts, scrapes, burns, sickness. There's lots of things as far as medical and medicine that you actually need to store and keep on hand. And, most of your medicine does have a shelf life on it. It doesn't mean that at the end of that shelf life, that once it expires, that it's bad and you have to throw it away. It just means that it's lost some of its effectiveness. The medicine may only be 80% effective or 70% effective versus 100% effective. So it still works. You just may have to take it for a longer period of time to get the same effect from it.
Now, there's one thing, though, if it's prescription drugs, especially, sometimes it changes the property when it waits too long.
Yeah.
So if you're on some kind of prescription drug, you need to maybe do some research see, because the molecular or chemical structure can change. But that's true. I mean, most things that say shelf life, it's just best by date.
Yep.
So definitely a big one. But you can go to medical classes. You can go to a standard first aid, Red Cross classes. They're free, and you can go and you can get really good medical training there. Going to a Stop the Bleed class, going to a trauma class. Yep. Medical Outfitters, Skinny Medic. I don't think he's done one lately, but he has them, and they are packed out. And people getting that medical training, they're excellent. Okay. We're going to do this. We're going to go to this one, and then we're going to go to questions. Communications. Now, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
I mean, we could do a can with a string. You could try that, But communications in ham radio is probably the best. But the problem is you really need to get your ham license, because, and here's the thing, you got to have a license really to get on ham and to talk. But the problem is the real problem is to know how to use a ham radio. They're fairly complicated. And so taking the class is really a huge benefit in getting your license. And then being able to, you can even set up a network that way.
Yeah.
But even getting your two-way radios out and see how far they'll go, train with that, see what they'll do. If you've got a CB, see what it'll do, whatever you're using.
I think CB is a great in-between alternative between two-way and ham. Your CBs, you can they're more than line of sight. You can get 5 miles, 10 miles, maybe a little further depending on your position and location. But CB is a great alternative to ham.
Right.
Short range alternative to ham.
Right. Yeah, that is because people have used those for years. They'd fallen out of favor some, but because of digital and sale and everything else. But if the grid goes down, it could be a great alternative to have at least some communication. Okay, let's go to some questions.
Michael Maldonado asks, I'm looking for a get home bag for me, an over the road truck driver. What are some recommendations you may have?
Man, there are so many good, solid bags out there. I'm a big Maxpedition fan. I love Maxpedition bags. Mystery Ranch makes some awesome bags. Vertec, they make some great bags. This is what I would say about a bag, because number one, you want to set that bag up under the rule of threes. And that's 3 minutes without air, 3 hours in harsh conditions. This is how long you can live. 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. Medical and self-defense flow in between. And I set my bags up that way. Have a good fire kit. With the shelter part, have some good clothing, or have a rain jacket in there for sure. Good boots. Make sure you have some good, sturdy walking shoes or boots. And make sure they're not brand new, that you've used them. Socks.
Plenty of extra socks.
You got
to keep the feet dry.
But, we've done some videos on get home bags. And I'll tell you this, we're actually working on a video talking about if you get stuck away from your home. One of the guys on our Patreon account, our Patreon team, is a truck driver. And he's talked about that. He says, what do I do if I'm this far from home? What do I need? So, and you could be on vacation. You could be, there's a ton of different things. Robbie just got back from Maine. He could have been up there.
But, and I was just about to bring that up. We were up in Maine last week, and just down below us in Vermont, they had terrible flooding all week long in that state. Lots of people displaced, lots of people killed because of the flooding. And, it was something that really came on quickly. It happened fast. And a lot of people were caught off guard in their vehicles and were stranded and stuck in their vehicles in floodwaters. And, having the ability and the equipment to be able to get out and to be able to get home and get away from that situation, is something that a lot of these people didn't think about and didn't prepare for.
Right. So definitely a well thought out bag, but there's a lot of videos about how to put together get home bags. But, I would also take my GPS or on my phone, and you can do, whether it's driving, and you can hit walking. And you can see how far it'll take you to get to that place. And if the grid goes down, you may not have that. So go ahead and figure that out when you can and say, okay, how long would it take me to walk home from here? And then, it gives you a good idea.
Gio asks, best on the go water filters.
I like the Grail. Is something I've been using lately. I really like the Grail, but I also like the Katadyn Pro hiker. I like the Katadyn systems. It's the now I always get the acronyms messed up, but I think it's RMS or RSM. Those filter systems are really good. Berkey makes a great portable filter system called the Sport Berkey.
The bottle systems are some of my favorites that have your filter built into the water bottle itself. That way you have a way to filter your water and a way to carry your water with you.
Yeah, you do want a container. You want a container, but I like systems like that. Or if you have a container, just a good high end. You can go to places that sell a lot of that specialize in camping gear. REI, they're expensive, but they carry really high quality stuff. They're left leaning, so you got to decide on that. But
and something to think about, for if you're wanting to try and keep everything small and compact and portable, is carrying a small bottle of bleach with you just to purify water.
Or water purification tabs.
Water purification tabs as well. But, a little bleach goes a long way when it comes to purifying water.
But one thing I like to do in all my packs, my little packs, is I put in one of the Frontier filter straws, the Aquamira filter straws, and they're really small. And the Pro does about 25 gallons, and I think the real small filter does like 11 gallons. So that makes it a real space saver.
John Thomas asks, what do you guys think is the first thing to learn that every prepper needs to know first if they are new?
Fire starting. And I'm going to tell you why. Fire, it cooks your food. It can boil your water. It gives you light. It gives you heat. And it keeps predators at bay. That's one of the sayings I have.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, fire is one of the most essential skills that you can learn because it is so useful. And man took fire right up front.
Yeah.
So learning your fire skills, learning how to build a fire, learning how to put together tinder, learning how to get your shavings on your wood to build a nest. That's one of the most important things.
And, I think that's something that a lot of people, especially people that grew up in the South, maybe grew up outdoors, hunting and stuff, camping, and really spending a lot of time outdoors. I think fire building skills is something that we almost take for granted because it's something that's been taught to us since we were, old enough to walk just about.
Yeah.
And, so I think it's something we take for granted often that it's something that everyone knows how to do, that it's just ingrained in us. Where, a lot of people grow up in urban areas today and never really have the opportunity to be able to start a fire and build a fire from scratch. And yeah, I agree with you 100%. That is one of those skills that everyone needs to know and be able to do very proficiently.
And filtering water, being able to know. I mean, you can take sand, charcoal, and grass and pour water down through it, and you can filter water that way.
Mm-hmm.
So they're primitive, but water is going to be a very important one as well. But yeah, because to me, if I had to, I could set up a dead fall trap, and get a squirrel or something, and I can cook it. And so I think that takes care of food to a degree. But there's so many that are so important. But to me, fire is probably one of the first ones that I would work on.
Mm-hmm.
Gary Hernandez, Self-Defense and Urban Survival, asks, hello, guys. The question is about medical. Without trying to become a nurse or physician, do you think looking for a medical short training course is the way to go? And if so, what do you recommend?
I highly recommend it. The thing is, like with the trauma class that we took with Medical Gear Outfitters, and I took it 3 times. It's not black magic. That's the funny thing, because a lot of times my wife's a nurse. She's a labor and delivery nurse for 20 years. And I always thought medical, I don't know. And I took that class and I was like, oh, well, that's not so hard. I mean, but you need to know what you don't know, you don't know. And so to me, that was one thing that really opened up my eyes to medical.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be a stop the bleed class. I mean, I'd taken the Red Cross classes, and you need to know CPR, those things. But to me, taking a good trauma class will put you miles ahead, especially in a emergency situation.
I mean, I think it really, as far as medical goes, I think it really depends on how far down the medical rabbit hole you want to go. I mean, if at the very basic, your basic CPR courses, your Red Cross training courses, your Stop the Bleed courses, at a minimum, if you really want to kind of go down that rabbit hole one step further and really learn a lot more about the medical side of it, look at taking a basic EMT course. I think they're about 6 months long. A lot of your technical schools offer it. You're not going and getting it to get certificate and become an EMT and all of that. You're taking it for the knowledge and the training that you're going to get from that course. And even working as a doing ride-alongs and stuff with EMTs and paramedics on ambulances, and learning some hands-on skills in an environment where you can actually get some hands-on training in a real situation.
I had a friend of mine that was a big prepper,
mm-hmm.
and he went to a class and became a paramedic just because he wanted to learn the skill.
Right.
And he ended up loving it.
Yep.
Okay, one more question, and we're going to go back to the list.
Walter Barger asked, how do you get the chemicals out of water they put in water? I think it's called PSF.
Some of the filter systems, the Berkey is supposed to be able to remove most of that. There are certain systems, but there are some things that are in the water that are very difficult to remove. It's funny. Scott Hunt from Engineer 775, probably one of the most incredible minds of prepping in the prepping community. And he told me, he said, there's more chemicals and chlorine, there's more bleach in your drinking water than there is in the pool. So, and I can't even drink tap water now because we use the Berkey exclusively, when we're at home. So, I do use this kind of stuff, but, yeah, I mean, it should get rid of a lot of that stuff, but what you're specifically referring to, I'm not sure, but I know it removes a lot of the different contaminants that they put in water. Okay, let's go. We're going to go to, is that?
You said that was the last question.
Yeah, it is. That's what I said. We're going to go to this. We're going to go to this now. Okay, so we talked about communication. Let's talk about, this is something that we all should know, is knife sharpening.
Yep, absolutely.
And listen, you can ruin a knife if you don't know what you're doing. You put that curl on there and you're just like, oh my gosh. Having knife sharpening skills. Now, I have one of the Knife Works or whatever those, the Blade Sharp or Knife Sharp or whatever. It's one of those, it's, you hook it into the wall and you can, sharpen your knife. It has the right angle. But I do have some standard stones. You just got to make sure you have that angle right. Got, some people can do it on grinding wheels and things like that. But
Yep.
in a grid down situation, I'll tell you a funny story. And this is out of the Bible. When the Philistines took over Israel back, 4,000 years ago, one of the things they did was they took all the sharpening stones away from the Israelites, so they couldn't sharpen their swords. Having a good sharp knife, having a good sharp axe, all those different things that you have, you need to be able to sharpen. And then you can get really technical and get into a saw, how to sharpen a saw. But learning how to sharpen. I have a guy that sharpens my knives, and so it made me kind of lazy. And I finally said, no, I've got to do this myself.
It's very easy to cut yourself with a dull knife.
Right.
Yeah, and that's something to always remember. Even if you're just cutting vegetables, have you ever tried to cut a tomato with a dull knife?
Oh yeah, it slides off. Yeah.
Right. It's really easy to slip and cut yourself with a dull knife. So having a sharp knife makes a lot of chores and a lot of tasks a lot easier.
Right.
And learning how to sharpen a knife yourself and keep your knives sharp is one of those skills that I think 100% of Americans should know, and 100% of the people around the world should know how to do. The Lansky system is a tried and true manual sharpening system with the different stones and everything. And there's so much you can learn about knife sharpening, the different steels and different stones, different grits, stropping the blade. There's a lot of different skills you can learn when it comes to knife sharpening. And that's one of those things that I do recommend you spending some time watching some YouTube videos, learning about different sharpening systems, different blade angles, different grinds, different, whether you're going to do a hollow grind or an angle cut on your blade to be able to get the correct angle and the right sharpness that you're looking for, the type of steel that you have.
Right. And getting steels that are really expensive are typically harder to sharpen.
Yep.
So it's something to think about. Candle making. It's a skill, and it's not a very difficult skill, but it's something to learn because, candles burn, and if electricity's out, that could be a big skill, could be a bartering skill. Of course, you got to get the wax, but and a lot of people use beeswax.
Yep.
You may have a beekeeper. We have one just right up the street here. So if I needed to make candles, I can go up there and get beeswax. So learning how to, and again, guys, some of these things are going to take stuff. And so finding some very simple candle making, The other thing too is, guys, all these skills, they don't necessarily need to be made or known just to you. You can spread this out of your family. You can spread it out over a group or a neighborhood, and everybody can take their specialty. Land nav,
the big one.
Land navigation. Just like with the trucker that asked that question a minute ago, is do you have maps? Do you have compass? And do you have, what you need to be able to get yourself home? And so a compass and learning how to use it.
Yep, absolutely.
I'll tell you one guy to check out. I just love his videos. Is Corporal's Corner. He's a former Marine, but he just goes out and builds shelters sometimes. He's just the coolest guy. He's very dry and just, but I really think he has a great channel. But he has a excellent video on land nav, basic land nav. And so I highly recommend it. I don't have a link or anything, but it's just Corporal's Corner. And this video is a little bit, he's had it out for a good while. But maps, guys, maps are very important. And learning to read maps, we have forgotten because of GPS. It's just like basic arithmetic. We've forgotten because we have our computer, we have our calculator. Learning that. And of course, when Robbie was in the Marine Corps, he got a crash course in land nav.
But even before I went in the Marine Corps, through Boy Scouts and everything, I had learned land nav a long time before I ever went in the Marine Corps. So that was an easy one to transition right into.
Right.
I already knew how to read maps. I already knew how to read topo maps. I already knew how to read, different with your topos. You've got your different grid lines and everything on there to show you peaks and valleys and how steep hills are and stuff. And being able to read all of that and know what all of that means based off of the lines that are on the map. Those are all important things to know.
Yeah. And two, even for defense, if you can read a map of your area, I highly recommend. In fact, we're going to be doing some videos on area studies. And I just got a book through, it's just absolutely awesome. Mike Shelby. In fact, I meant to have it with me to show because I just really love this book. But a lot of it has to do with maps and knowing your area and where threats can come in and things like that. So map reading and land nav.
Even hunting. Being able to read a map,
hiking,
finding choke points, finding funnels for the animals, basic travel routes for animals in the woods. You can learn a lot of stuff from a map when it comes to hunting before you ever step foot on the ground.
Right. So, and Google Earth also, there's a lot of resource there.
Mm-hmm.
Shelter. Being able to build a shelter, and having maybe even tarps. You can use tarps. I did a video on like different tarp setups, and we just, it was just a bunch of different tarp setups, but even building them out of, the material around you, like logs and stuff like that.
And it kind of goes back to one of the first ones we were talking about with carpentry.
Yeah.
And that carpentry and shelter fall hand in hand with one another.
And knife sharpening, because you got to sharpen your axe.
That's right.
Or your saw or
That's
whatever.
Right.
So,
and it's all cumulative. Everything builds on one another to be able to make one skill easier because you have the other skills.
That's right. That's a good point. Okay, making traps, deadfall traps, making different type traps. I have a bear trap that my grandfather, it's up here. Oh, there it is right there. It's just a game trap actually, but it's a trap that you hit a plate and the thing collapses on their ankle and they can't get away. But having different type traps, there are the traps where they, go into it and they can't come back out.
Mm-hmm.
There's the rabbit gum. My grandpa used to have rabbit gums, and we used to go and collect them. And one time there was a skunk in one. Thank goodness I wasn't there for that one. But, being able to trap, setting up a rock with a stick and, pulling your trap and being able to, have that deadfall trap for small animals. But learn trapping. I mean, it's one of those skills, and it can be used for fishing as well.
Yep.
Okay, now we're going to switch gears a little bit, and because we want to talk about cooking from scratch. We have gotten so used. Now, some of you guys probably cook from scratch, but we've gotten so used to processed stuff.
Yep.
And if you're like me, and I've been doing this for a long time, so we have a lot of long-term food storage stuff like grains, and we got a grinder to grain, the things you need to make bread. Do you have the things you need? Could you do it without self-rising flour?
Well, one of the nice things around here where we live, we actually have a grist mill not far from our house that's still operational, where we can go and purchase ground corn, ground wheat, ground oats to be able to cook with. And so that's one of the things that we do, which we try and purchase a lot of locally grown stuff, locally sourced and locally ground food making materials to be able to store.
And that's something that would continue to go even during a grid down
That's
situation.
right.
Knowing those areas, we just went in with some friends and bought a cow of a local farmer, we're getting it processed and everything. But knowing those areas is another skill. Knowing where the local farms are,
That's
knowing where you can get more for if you need it. So cooking from scratch, learning how to do that. Also, gardening, of course. Gardening is big, guys. I mean, gardening is one of those things that's self-sustaining if you know what you're doing. But guys, don't think I've got my emergency seed bank of seed and I've had it for 10 years that it's worth anything now. And if you haven't gone out and planted it, and Robbie and I can tell you, it's a lot of work, and knowing how to take care of pests.
Yeah.
That's a big problem.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest issue with gardening is how to keep pests off of your fruits and vegetables. We had just came back from vacation and we're up picking a bunch of stuff in the garden, and there was a caterpillar. Dude, this thing was bigger than my finger on my pepper plants. And I was like, no. You've got to go, buddy.
Yeah, those hornworms getting in your tomatoes. And
Yep.
I mean, there's just a lot of, and then there's blight, and there's certain things to,
Yep.
the certain soil, you have something in your soil. So gardening, even if you live in an apartment and you have a little balcony, put out some tomato plants.
That's
But
right.
do
You
some
can
herbs.
do hanging baskets with lots of different vegetables and herbs, spices.
Because getting into it and learning is really one of the critical things. Then when you get to a bigger plot, you'll be able to use those skills. But do what you can, and start to get into doing some stuff. And two, in a grid down situation, at least you'll have you can supplement some fresh tomatoes or whatever with what you have. Canning is, a lost art. And so it's one of those things that I know you guys have done a lot of canning.
We do a lot of canning every year.
And long-term food storage, you're growing what you have. I mean, but you got to have certain things.
Yeah. We'll be doing a bunch of pickling this week.
Yeah. So
It's
I
gonna
mean,
be,
that's
cucumbers and pickle some green tomatoes and then the peppers and everything. So we've got a pretty big week ahead of us pickling this week.
yeah, I love it. We pickled some really nice peppers, and they're really hot. And I love it, because and that stuff just lasts, and it supplements some of the other food. If you're just stocking up on, freeze dried food and MREs and whatever, you really need to have that live food to come in there and help, and it can at least supplement it. Wild edibles, learning some things about what is edible. Dandelions.
That's one that. So there's a lot of wild edibles that I'm very familiar with, and there's a lot of wild edibles that we pick and we harvest every year. The one thing that I am severely negligent on in my understanding are wild mushrooms.
Oh yeah.
Wild mushrooms are one of those that this year I'm making it a point to really learn what mushrooms grow in my area, what mushrooms are edible, what mushrooms I can pick and harvest and store.
Right. That's a great one, because that is one of the most complicated, because you can drink mushroom
trouble.
tea, or you can die from it, so you got to be really careful. And there are clubs, actual clubs that do that. But cattails are great. The little onions that grow up in your yard, those are edible.
That's right.
The bark, the pine bark, you strip the pine bark, and there's that kind of stringy stuff on the outside of the wood. That's cambia, and it's edible. And they made flour out of that. They fried it. They ate it. I've eaten it. I fixed a bunch of it. You can take pine needle tea. You can take pine needle. It creates vitamin C. It gives you a vitamin C source. So learning some of those things, and the pioneers learned a lot of that, but learning some of those basics, and then you expand from there.
That's right.
Okay, now the next is chickens, rabbits, just husbandry in general. One of the things about chickens, and guys, if you've ever had chickens, the eggs are absolutely phenomenal. And, it's a great source for not only chickens, but also for the meat. And so, we got a call.
But yes, like he was saying, chickens, rabbits, being able to grow your own meats, being able to harvest your own meats, have your own eggs. Rabbits are a great nutrient source. And depending on the type of rabbit that you get, we've grown rabbits for a long, long time. The Flemish Giants are one of my favorites.
Yeah.
They go from a little bitty rabbit to a great big rabbit really quickly. And I think like 60 to 90 days, you can harvest those and go ahead and process them. Rabbits are super easy to process, much easier to process than chickens.
You take those rabbit feet.
You really do. I mean, we've got a little post with a nail in it, and you just hang him up on there and a couple of cuts and just peel him.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there you've got it.
Yep.
And two, rabbits are a lot more quiet than chickens.
Yep.
That's a big one. And it's something actually that we're talking about doing because, we have a neighbor right up the street that has chickens, rabbits, and a bunch of stuff too. And that's one of the things that, we've been talking to them.
And one of the nice things about rabbits is they reproduce like rabbits. So you get a lot of turnover with them.
You do. And then it goes into hunting. Now, one thing I want to mention about hunting, and we talked about this the other day, but with the Great Depression, it almost wiped out all game on North America. So hunting is one of those things that is going to be a limited source after, possible, food shortages.
Yeah.
And so learning, though, how to process the food.
I think that's one of the things with hunting that is a skill that you can learn now while things are normal. Is you learn those skills, but you also learn how to process and field dress and quarter and cut the meat and prepare the meat to be able to either store it, freeze it, smoke it, dry it, whatever you're going to do with it. But learning those skills now in a normal situation, you'll have later if things go to pot.
Right. And it's something it's tough for some people to get past that, to actually process a deer, but it's something that, if that's your food source, it's going to be very important. And then two, another thing about hunting is it gets you out and you're stealth and you're quiet, how to conceal. So it can lead into other areas of prepping.
That's right. Learning the land around you.
Learning that binoculars are really cool and useful, and it's better than pointing a rifle when you're sitting up there, and also to be warm enough.
Yep.
We were up there that last time. Yes. It was about 2 degrees. Thank goodness we were all wrapped up. But, hunting, fishing, same thing. And fishing, learning how to clean the fish.
That's right. Different fish you process different ways.
That's right.
You've got some that have scales, some that have skin. How do you process those? Are you gonna just cut the heads off of them? You gonna fillet them? What size fish do you need to
scale them with that scaler?
Right. There's a lot to fish that for someone like me that has lived that way my entire life, it's second nature. But for a lot of people that have never been fishing, they're like, what do I use for bait? What's a hook? I mean, really. But down to the really basics of it. And then once you catch a fish, how do you take the hook out of its mouth? How do you clean the fish? How do you keep the fish until you get back to where you're going to where you can clean it?
Right.
So,
exactly.
I mean, there's a lot that goes into it.
But you're right. I grew up, my grandfather, man, he was a fisherman extraordinaire. And we would clean tons of fish. We'd take us fishing. We'd clean tons of fish. Okay. So, and fishing and cleaning. Okay. So that's it. And of course, it's a good thing. So if we have a couple of questions, we can take those. I had to put her on the spot.
Jerry Fowler asked, is it safe using modern metal roofing as a part of a water catchment system? You commented last week about acetone bleeding from the shingled roofing. Yes.
It's according to what the metal's treated for, but it can't be any worse than the acetone on the shingles. And actually, my buddy who went up to talk to this guy that lives completely off the grid, in fact, he uses rainwater. He has some methods that he uses, and one is distilling water. But we were going to have a meeting, and instead we had some people out of town, so we ended up going to watch The Sound of Freedom, which was, I highly recommend The Sound of Freedom. But anyway, I think that metal roofing seems to be a much better option for rain catchment as far as drinking water. There's other water that you need, but we're going to be talking about that specifically coming up because that's a big thing. We have a really extensive rain catchment system. And so we need to know this for ourselves. So I'm going to do that. But one thing that we talked about, and this is something I'm actually going to do on this building, that my shop is, I'm going to run a rain catchment system to it. And the water that goes to that gutter, I'm going to cover it with something that will not leach that acetone into it. So that is one thing that I'm going to do. I'm going to try some different things. One thing you can do is even set a barrel out and just let it rain in it, but you want to make sure it's covered with some kind of mesh or something. But yeah, that's a big one. We haven't quite got all the answers. My buddy John that went up there, he got some answers, and we're supposed to talk about it Sunday night. So that's coming up.
Stephen Churchman says, "Hi, Don and Robbie. Steve from England. What is your opinion of hardtack as a survival food? Do you think it has a place as a survival food?"
Yes, I do. And it gives you, I mean, for a long time, not just Civil War, obviously, if you're in England, but the sea biscuit, all those different things, and we did a video about making hardtack. In fact, Sarah Mack actually made the video. I just ran my mouth. But that's one thing that, it's a simple thing to do. It's simple ingredients. Mm-hmm. It's something that, can sustain you. So I think it's definitely, and two, our ancestors used that to live on in certain times. So just make sure you dip it in your soup or your coffee. But yeah, that to me is an excellent source, and it's a good skill to learn. That's a skill right there. So yes.
Sunshiny Days ask, "Hey guys, do you have more in-person classes to teach? If so, how can I attend? I'm in your area."
No, we don't. We don't. Mm-mm. We do lives, and that's it. But yeah, for us, especially for me, I have 2 YouTube channels, so I stay extremely busy.
He talks a lot,
and I talk a lot. So no, I don't have anything that we do live. Now we used to do. Now there are prepper conventions that happen, and I used to speak at a lot of those. I'd go and speak at those. In fact, Carolina Readiness. It's outside of Clyde, North Carolina. Carolina Readiness. Jan and Bill, awesome people. They have conferences. Prepper conferences. In fact, William Forstian, who wrote 1 Second After, attended. He spoke at one of the conferences that I was speaking at, and I got to really spend some time with him. And also, there is Prepper Camp, not far from here, up in Saluda, and it's a week-long thing where everybody camps, but they have people speak, and they have all kind of different things. So there are some resources right around this area if you live in this area. But and we used to have our prepper conferences, come to think of it. But it's been a number of years ago. We used to have those, and they were really well attended. We'd have 300 or 400 people come out. But we lost our venue, and we just never got back to it. But I don't know. Maybe in the future we might do something, but for right now, no. Okay, it is 1:00. Guys, I'm gonna tell you, I just really appreciate you being here with us, and I hope some of these things help to kind of some skills that you want to learn. Listen, it's not all about acquiring stuff. It is about having tools that you need, but it's about being able to use them, and especially like with a fire. I mean,
absolutely,
it's a big one. Firearms, guys. Go out, and not only for you to learn. Take your kids, take your wife out. Let her shoot. She may be your defense one day. She may save your life because you've taken her out to shoot. Or women, if you got a husband that doesn't shoot, take him out. But having the good skills, and your kids need to know. In a world like today, especially after watching that crazy movie we watched, it was really awesome. Kids are vulnerable, and so you need to teach them. They could be at home by themselves, and that's happened a number of times across the country.
That's right. And that's the thing with a lot of the skills that we already have that we take for granted, we're not passing those skills on. No, and that needs to be something that we make it a point to do, or pass on the skills and the knowledge that we already have to others.
That's right. Again, we really appreciate Robbie Wheaton for being here. Check out Wheaton Arms, and also the Robbie Wheaton YouTube channel.
Yes, sir.
And we really appreciate Robbie for being here. And also, Sarah Mack, thanks for taking care of the comments and the questions. And thanks for you guys just for being here. And also, we appreciate Exotac. You get 20% off using Sootch 20 with the link down below in the description. Awesome. Made in the USA fire starters in Winder, Georgia. And those guys are great. So we're going to sign off. Be strong. Be of good courage. God bless America. Long live the Republic.